Hey folks, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be having a look at a couple of little radios here. Not my usual Bowfangs, but for a change we're going to be having a look at this little radio called the Quansheng. I've got two models of it here. The first one is the original Quansheng UVK5R. And the second one is actually the latest variant of the little radio, and it's called the Quansheng UVK5R Plus. So first thing we probably notice is the similarity in the name to a radio that we're probably all very familiar with if you're a ham radio fan, and that is of course the ubiquitous little Bowfang UV5R. So yeah, I think there's been a little bit of name copying there from Quansheng because the names are so familiar. Bowfang UV5R, probably the most popular little ham radio in the world. But these little radios, they've really been taking the internet by storm of late. I've seen so many videos on them, and they're incredibly popular little radio, the Quansheng UVK5R. And the reason that they're probably so popular is because they have such a great little specification at such a cheap price. I mean, if you take, for instance, this little radio here, the UVK5R, I bought this from China for a total of £15, and that included delivery and taxes all the way from China for £15, and the same with the later version. That was the same price as well, the UVK5R Plus. It represents incredible value for money for anyone who's wanting to get into radio, because the specification in these radios is actually quite good, and they're capable of receiving quite a wide frequency range. Out of the box, the little UVK5, we'll just refer to it as here, it can receive a frequency range from 50 megahertz right up to 600 megahertz, which is a very broad frequency range for such a little radio. I mean, typically your little Bowfang here, out of the box, it'll just receive your usual 136 to 174 megahertz and 400 to 520 megahertz frequency range. But as I say, the little Quansheng here can do 50 to 600 receive. Obviously the transmit is the same as the Bowfang. It transmits on the ham bands between 136, 174 and 400, 520. So yeah, it has a very broad frequency range, and it represents excellent value for money. But even more interesting about this little £15 radio is that you can update the firmware on it, which we'll have a look at later. You can update the firmware and expand the frequency range even further. I have installed the custom firmware onto this little radio, and it gives it a frequency range from 18 megahertz right up to 1300 megahertz, which is crazy. I mean, 18 megahertz, you're right down into the HF band there. Not that they would probably pick up very much with the little rubber ducky antenna that comes on it, but nonetheless, the radio is capable of using those frequencies. So, very interesting range on the radio if you program it with the custom firmware. To turn it on, it's basically just
Welcome, channel mode 2.
Very similar to the Bofang UV5R that we're all familiar with. Slightly different keyboard layout. I actually prefer the keyboard layout on the Bofang. With the Bofang, it's probably a bit simpler to change from frequency mode to channel mode.
Channel mode.
If we look at the Quansheng, it's currently in channel mode, and if you want to change to frequency mode, then it's a 2-button press. You have to press the F and key button down in the bottom right, and then hit the button number 3, which is the VFO and memory button. So if I wanted to change into frequency mode, I would have to have a 2-button press, so I'd have to do
frequency mode,
and that would get me into frequency mode. And to go back into channel mode,
channel mode 2.
So as I say, it's 2 buttons you need to do, and that's similar with a lot of the functions on the radio. It requires a 2-button press, whereas with the little Bofang here, we have the familiar orange button on the top left with the VFO and MR on it. So it's a 1-button press. You can go between channel mode and frequency mode.
Frequency mode. Channel mode.
So a bit simpler from that point of view, and again switching between the top and frequency and the bottom frequency is also simpler on the Bofang, because we have our AB selection button there, so we can switch between the top and the bottom. As we can see, the little arrow moves from the top to the bottom depending on which frequency we want to select. So I actually prefer the layout of the Bofang. Also, I think the audio quality on the Bofang is superior. If I had one complaint about the little UV 5R K5R, it would be that the audio quality is not terribly good on it. As you can see, it's a fairly tiny little radio. The dimensions of it are pretty small, and subsequently the speaker inside it is very small. So the audio does tend to be a bit tinny, shall we say, a bit tinny on it. They did try to fix that in the later version, the
channel mode
K5R Plus, and yes, there is a subtle difference. It's definitely a bit more bassy on the K5R Plus. So if audio is your priority, I think you would probably be better off getting the later version, the K5R Plus, rather than the earlier one. But that said, there is another difference between the later model and the earlier model. Now, there are a couple of other models in between these two. This is the very latest one, and this is the very earliest one, but there are, I think there's another one in between these two, which is almost identical to the original, but again with the slightly improved speaker and a slightly different cosmetic appearance. But the one thing to note of difference between the original and the latest model is that the original model comes with, if we look under here, we can see that it actually comes with USB charging, which of course is a very handy feature. And unfortunately, on the very latest model, the UVK5R Plus, they did away with that because they still have the same flap there, but if you look underneath it, there's actually nothing there. It's just blanked off. So they did away with the USB charging on the K5R Plus, which for me is not terribly good. It means that this radio can only be cradle charged. It can't be charged up via USB-C, which the original version can. So sort of a step backwards there, really. To look at the two radios, they're almost identical, but the later model actually has an upgraded battery in it. The original one, the K5R, comes with a 1600 milliamp hour battery, as we'll see if we take it out here. That's your original 1600 milliamp hour battery. It's definitely quite a bit thinner than the later Plus version of the radio, as we take them out by comparison. But if we look inside, we can see it's the frequency range is 136 to 174, 400 to 470 megahertz, which is pretty standard for sort of little ham radio, similar to the Bofang UV5R. And again, if we look inside the UV5R Plus, you can see again similar frequency range, 136 through to 174, 400 to 470. So again, pretty typical little ham radio frequencies. That's for transmit, of course. Receive range is greatly expanded. So again, the battery in the K5R Plus is actually, what has it? It's according to the writing here, it is a 2200 milliamp hour battery. So it's definitely a bit fatter and more substantial than the 1600 milliamp hour battery that is fitted to the original UVK5R. But again, it's a bit of a disappointment that they did away with the USB charging in the 5R Plus version. So a definite difference in spec there. So it's down to yourself. As I say, the original has the USB-C charging, slightly tinny speaker and slightly smaller amperage battery. The latest version has a more substantial battery, a better speaker, but again you lose out on the USB-C charging. So you pays your money, it takes your choice really there. Pretty typical little radio.
Welcome, channel mode 2.
As I say, the menu button is up here on the top left.
Menu.
Gets you into your menu. I won't go through it in detail, but it's pretty typical. It's a very extensive menu, covers a lot of ground, probably a lot more features in it than the Bofang has. But again, very comprehensive menu. Allows for all your settings in there, and as I say,
cancel.
Very comprehensive menu, very good, and the menus of course are almost identical in the two radios. Slight difference in the screen, as we see whenever we turn on the UVK5R. The screen is just
welcome, channel mode
sort of plain white screen. When when we turn on the K5R Plus, we initially get a blue screen.
Welcome, channel mode 2.
As we see, so slight difference there, although it does, as I say, default back to just the plain LCD screen. So slight difference there, not a big lot really. The top of the radios are identical. The little flashlight on the top, the on-off control knob. The original one has that orange surround to the on-off knob. The later version just a plain black one. So yeah, very similar. Subtle differences between them. The main thing, as I say, about these wee radios is the price. They are so cheap, and if you want to get into radio, obviously they are ham radios. They're primarily designed for someone who has a ham license to be able to transmit on. But at the same time, because you can upgrade the firmware on these things, and they have such an expansive frequency range, you can actually listen on them quite extensively. And of course, one feature which I haven't mentioned yet is that they can actually receive airband. Not terribly well, I have to say. I mean, the sound is pretty distorted on it and pretty bad. But nonetheless, they have that capability. They can both receive airband frequencies. So if you're a plane spotter and you're into your aeroplanes and listening to the air traffic control and listening to planes on the AM band, then you can actually do it with these little radios. As I say, the audio quality is pretty poor. There's a lot of hiss in the background, but if you listen intently, you can make them out. I think it's mainly because it's not true AM reception. They actually decode via FM, but at the same time, it is possible to receive aircraft AM on both these little radios. So another feature there for someone who's just interested in listening rather than transmitting. These little radios are an excellent option, and of course the little Bofang UV5R has no airband capability at all. Can't receive AM airband frequencies, so that's one up to the little Quanshengs there for having an advantage in that area. If I can just go on to, as I say, I mentioned earlier that these little radios, they're capable of having the firmware updated, and you can actually update it via a web browser. You don't actually have to download, an executable program and run that on your computer. You can actually run it directly from a web browser. Again, on the side of these little radios, you'll see they have the flap on the side, the standard sort of flap for a Bofang programming cable, the usual Bofang cable with the two Kenwood type connector pins on it, and of course they connect in under the flap on the side. So they will accept a Bofang programming cable in order to connect that to your computer via the programming cable. So if you have one of those lying about that you use with your Bofang UV5R, then you can utilize that with the Quansheng to program it and update the firmware. And speaking of programming, you can of course program these little radios via chirp. They are supported via chirp, or you can use the Quansheng's own CPS software, downloadable. I think it comes in Chinese initially, and you have to fiddle about a bit to find the setting that actually turns it into English, but it is available. I've used it to program these little radios, So you can program it via Chirp or via the Quansheng's own CPS software, whichever you prefer. Fairly straightforward, as I say. The firmware, as I say, you can plug in your Bofang cable, plug it into your computer, and then go on to this website here. Now, just try and adjust the screen a bit on the laptop so we don't get too much reflection here. But I hope you can see that all right. This is actually the website you need to go to in order to upgrade the firmware on it. I'll leave a link in the description. And as we can see on here, this is the web browser. It needs to work in either Google Chrome, or it will also work in Microsoft Edge, which apparently is a Chrome-based browser. But it needs to be a Chrome-based browser for this to work. But as we can see, when we're on the web page there is this software, and basically what you do is you go and you select the patch firmware. You then select, you can either have it patch for all radios or patch for a specific model of radio. If you're using the original radio, you'd choose patch for K5, K6, K5 version 8. Or if you have the other one that I have, which is the latest one, you can choose the patch for the K5R Plus. So select that depending on which radio you have, and then it's a matter of plugging in your radio and when you're ready, you actually flash the firmware. One thing that I noted, I've watched a couple of videos on programming, or rather upgrading the firmware on these little radios, and on the two videos that I watched, both of them failed to mention that before you go to patch the firmware on this little radio, you have to actually put it into the mode where the radio will accept flashing. And everybody failed to mention that on the two initial videos that I watched. But the way you do that on this little radio, in order to prepare it to put it into flash mode, as we will call it, you have to have the radio turned off. You have to hold down the push to top button and then turn the radio on. Now, as we can see, the radio is actually on, but the screen is completely blank, and the flashlight on the top is staying on permanently. Now that indicates that the radio is now in flash mode, is ready for the firmware to be flashed. Now that's something that was failed to mention in the two videos that I watched. So whenever you go to flash this little radio, the procedure is plug in your Bofang cable with your radio switched off, plug it into the side of your computer, your USB port. Now hold down the push to talk button and turn your radio on. Now, as I say, the screen on the radio will remain blank, but the flashlight on the top will remain on permanently, and that indicates that the radio is now in flash mode and is ready to be flashed, and you can go ahead now with the flash procedure. You will have to select the COM port for the cable, as you do when programming any radio via the cable. You have to first select the correct COM port, and then you can proceed with the flash. As we go back to the software here, we can see that on the web page here, you have a list of modifications that you can do to the radio. For instance, this first one, if you tap on apps, and you can now select from a range of these here, an RSSIS meter and battery voltage readout on the main screen, spectrum analyzer. You can have that. You can only have one of these, by the way. You can't have them all that are in this particular group, so pick whichever one you want. Pong game, you know. So the one that I picked was the RSSIS meter and battery voltage readout, which the radio doesn't have by default. It doesn't show the battery voltage or the S meter. It doesn't have an S meter in the original firmware. So that's one that I picked. If we scroll on down, you can change the battery icon, which I did. I selected that one as well. So you can have a sort of more standard battery icon rather than the original one. Custom boot screen if you want. Skip boot screen. You can change the font. You can change it to a negative display, so you kind of like have white characters in a black background instead of black characters in a white background. I just left mine standard. You can disable the frequency copy timeout. That's one that I selected because the timeout on that is quite limited on the original firmware, so I selected that one. Again, here's one if you're not a licensed ham and you just want to use the radio for listening on frequencies. That's quite a good one to select because that will completely disable the push to talk button on the side of the radio, so you won't accidentally transmit. So that's a good option for anybody who's not a licensed ham and doesn't want to transmit in the radio but just wants to use it purely for listening. Then that's a good option to select. Again, you can adjust the backlight duration. I selected up to 20 seconds because by default it's only up to 5 seconds, which is very short really. So I selected this option here, which gives you up to 20 seconds backlight. You can have it up to 40 seconds backlight if you want, but that's the one that I selected. There's various other things: menu strings, increase microphone gain, Roger beep, enable SWDB port, custom frequency ranges. Now that's one that I also selected, and I would recommend that one to extend the frequency range on the little Quansheng. I mean, it's already good out of the box, 50 to 600, but as you can see here, you can extend it from 18 megahertz right up to 1300 megahertz. So that is absolutely amazing that you could have such a cheap little radio with such a wide frequency range. So I selected that one as well. Again, frequency steps, you can adjust those. NOAA frequencies, they won't apply to us in the UK because we can't actually receive that here. AM and all bands, so you can normally the AM is restricted to the usual 108 to 136 air band, but you can enable that on all frequencies if you want. You can change your FM broadcast radio receptions, air copy frequency, LCD contrast. You can adjust that, so you can pick whatever you want from the menu. And once you're ready to flash the radio, then all you have to do is click on that flash directly button there, and we click on that, and it will bring up this box here, which asks you to select the COM port for your radio. So you have to make sure and select that before you go to flash the firmware. Once you've done that, then all you have to do is click on the, I'm not going to do it, but you click on the the flash directly button here, and it will flash the firmware on your radio via the web browser, so it saves a lot of hassle trying to flash the firmware via the more traditional means. The program does come with a full list of instructions. If you tap that, it will give you full instructions on how to flash the radio, so it's well worth having a read at that before you attempt to flash the radio. I know some people are a bit wary about flashing radios because you could end up bricking it, but at the end of the day we're talking about a little £15 radio here, so if you did brick it, I mean, you're not going to be out on a heck of a lot of money. And I personally have flashed several of these little radios. I've flashed them several times actually, because I was experimenting with different versions of the firmware, and had absolutely no problem whatsoever with the flashing process. It all went very smoothly, and as I say, I'm now rewarded with the more extensive frequency range. As we can see, the little battery voltage, we may not be able to see it too well. I'll try getting the light on there.
Welcome, channel mode 2.
I'm not sure if you can see it, but there is actually a voltage readout there, 7.99 volts it's reading at the minute on the little display there. So great little fun radios. I think that's the main thing. If I had to say one thing about the Quansheng,
Channel mode 2.
it is a fun little radio. I mean, for £15, I mean, what are you going to do with £15 nowadays? I mean, probably buy a few beers, but honestly, if you want to have a bit of fun on a radio, I can heartily recommend buying these. As I say, they come from China, delivered, taxes, all the rest of it. £15, and it gets you into radio. You can have tremendous fun with them, playing about with them, and if you're a licensed ham, of course you can use them to transmit on the ham bands in the UK. The FM, VHF and UHF frequencies that ham bands can transmit on. Or if you're not licensed, as I say, they're still great fun little radios if you update the firmware as I described there. You can actually disable the push to talk on them and just have them as a little kind of listening radio. You can scan on them as well. Again, it's fairly slow. It won't be as quick as a dedicated scanner, but you can scan through your channels. You can listen to the very broad frequency range that these wee radios have. You can listen to the air band on them. Again, it won't be terribly good quality, but it is decipherable just about. So great fun little radio, slightly different from what we're used to with the Bofang UV5R, but great fun little radios, great value for money, and I can heartily recommend them if you want to just play about, have a bit of fun with a small, cheap Chinese radio. So, that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, folks. Give it a thumbs up, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.